Have you guys ever wondered what if Zoro was the main character in One Piece? How would this impact the entire storyline, and what will happen to Luffy and the others? In this video, we'll look at an alternate timeline in which Zoro is the main character. Without any further ado, let's dive right into it. Unlike Luffy, Zoro didn't grow up dreaming of becoming the Pirate King. He dreamed of one thing only, being the strongest. Born in Shimotsuki village, he never fit in. No parents, no family anyone knew of, just a stubborn kid with wooden swords strapped to his back, looking for someone strong enough to beat. At 4 years old, he walked into the Ishin Dojo and challenged the strongest student there. That student was Kuina. She was a year older and smaller, but unsettlingly calm. Their first match lasted 6 months. By the end of the day, he had lost to her 7 times. He came back the next morning before sunrise to fight her again. For the next 10 years, Zoro fought Kuina almost every day. 2001 matches, and he lost every single one. But every loss made him sharper. Somewhere around his 8th birthday, he started beating everyone else in the dojo. By 13, traveling swordsmen avoided Shimotsuki entirely, but Zoro only cared about the one match he could never win. The night before their 2002 match, Zoro saw Kuina cry for the first time. She told him that the world had already decided a woman could never become the strongest swordsman in it. He sat with her in the quiet and made her a promise. One of them would become the strongest swordsman in the world, and it didn't matter which one, as long as the name belonged to someone from their village. The next morning, she was dead. She had fallen down the stairs in the middle of the night. A stupid, meaningless accident. Zoro stood in front of her body for 3 hours without moving. Then he walked into Master Koshiro's office and asked for Wado Ichimonji, her family's white blade. Koshiro handed it to him without a word. Zoro left Shimotsuki that same week. For the next 5 years, he wandered the East Blue alone, taking every fight he could. He picked up bounty hunting to survive. The town started whispering his name like a ghost. Roronoa Zoro, the pirate hunter. 3 swords, green hair, never loses. By 19, he had one burning question that wouldn't let him sleep at night. Where was the man called Hawkeye Mihawk, and how could he find him? For 5 years, Zoro chased Mihawk's name and never caught up. The world's greatest swordsman didn't stay still long enough to be tracked by a teenager with 3 swords. So Zoro stopped chasing. He decided to make himself impossible to ignore. He would build a reputation so loud that the man at the top of the mountain would have to look down. That meant the Grand Line, and for the first time in his life, it meant a crew. He was drinking alone in a tavern when a kid in a straw hat sat down across from him without asking. The kid slid a wanted poster across the table. It was Zoro's face. He said he was building a crew and he wanted the strongest swordsman in the East Blue. Zoro didn't look up. He told the kid to leave before he got hurt. The kid laughed and said he'd leave if Zoro could beat him in a fight. Zoro drew his sword in a single motion, meant to end the conversation in one strike. The blade stopped an inch from the kid's throat, caught between 2 rubber palms, which shocked Zoro. For the first time in 5 years, Zoro had no idea what he was looking at. He sheathed the sword and asked where the ship was. The kid's name was Luffy. The terms were simple. Luffy was captain in name only. Zoro's dream came first, and the day his path to Mihawk demanded leaving the crew behind, he would without a word. Luffy agreed without thinking. The story progresses similarly to the original timeline here, as they eventually meet Nami and then Sanji. That was where the world stopped turning for Zoro. A black ship cut through the water like a coffin with sails, and the man standing on its deck didn't need an introduction. Dracule Mihawk, Hawkeye. The strongest swordsman alive, drawn to the Baratier by a rumor that had finally reached the right ears. A green-haired boy in the East Blue who refused to lose. Zoro didn't speak. He didn't need to. 5 years of hunting collapsed into a single moment on the deck of a floating restaurant. He drew all 3 swords and attacked without hesitation, and without a single thought beyond the promise he had made on a dojo step under the stars. Mihawk pulled out a knife and used it to block every strike Zoro threw. Every slash, every spin, every move Zoro had spent 5 years learning, all of it blocked by a knife. Zoro's hands started to shake. He swung harder. The knife didn't move. When it finally ended, 2 of Zoro's swords were broken on the deck, and his chest was open from shoulder to hip. He stood there bleeding, refusing to fall, and turned to face Mihawk with his arms spread wide. He told the man to finish it. Mihawk looked at him for a long moment, then drew his real blade for the first time. The cut was clean and ceremonial, across the chest, deep but not killing. Mihawk told him to grow stronger, to find him again when the rumor of a green-haired boy had become the rumor of a man worth killing. Then he sailed away. Sanji watched the whole thing from Baratier's deck, and stepped onto their ship without being asked. He'd already decided this was the only crew worth cooking for. The story progresses after this as they enter the Grand Line with Zoro leading the crew. All the characters keep on getting stronger, as Zoro eventually unlocks his Conqueror's Haki as well. They gather more crew members, and it was finally time for them to separate on Sabori. Zoro gets thrown off to a remote island where he comes across a strange fruit. A black sphere swirled with patterns that hurt to look at directly. He didn't know what it was and ate the fruit. After all this, Zoro gets news of Ace's capture. He knew Luffy would go after him and decided to go as well. It takes him some time because we all know his direction skills. By the time Zoro got there, the war was already in full swing. Luffy had fought through hell to reach Ace, and somehow he'd done it. The chains were off and the brothers were standing together, ready to run. That's when Akainu opened his mouth. He said something about Whitebeard that Ace couldn't walk away from. Ace turned back, stepped in front of Luffy, and Akainu came at him with that magma fist glowing white-hot. Just as he was about to strike Ace, something strange happened. A single slash cut through the air so fast nobody saw it. Akainu's arm came clean off at the shoulder before the magma ever touched Ace. The arm hit the ground, still burning. The Admiral stumbled back as Zoro was standing between him and the brothers. He'd walked through a battlefield full of admirals and warlords, and not one of them noticed him until he sliced off Akainu's arm. He didn't say a word. He just raised his swords. Except this time, there weren't 3 of them. There were 9. 6 extra arms had grown out of his back, each one holding a blade. 3 faces flickered around his shoulders. This was the Hito Hito no Mi model Ashura, a mythical Zoan that had been sitting in a forest for hundreds of years, waiting. These fruits don't just get eaten by anyone, they pick their user. It had been waiting on Zoro, the same way Wado Ichimonji had years before. Akainu came at him with his one good arm. Zoro cut through the magma, the Admiral's coat, and the stone under his feet in one motion that didn't even look like a motion. Akainu dropped. He didn't die, but he was done for the rest of the war. Zoro escapes with Luffy and Ace. The next morning, the papers ran the same picture. Zoro in his Ashura form. People had started calling him Demon. After Marineford, the crew scattered for 2 years. Zoro spent those years under the worst teacher he could have asked for, Dracule Mihawk. The man who had carved a scar across his chest at the Baratier was now the man teaching him how to survive everything that came after. By the end of it, Zoro could fight in his Ashura form without breaking a sweat. He could cut steel, then air, then the space between his own breaths. The crew reunited 2 years later, and the world watched them sail into the new world like a death sentence. Doflamingo lasted 10 minutes. Big Mom's army didn't slow him down. Then came Wano. The battle on the rooftop of Onigashima lasted 3 days, and it was Zoro who landed the final cut. In his Ashura form, with all 9 swords aligned, he split Kaido from shoulder to hip, and dropped the strongest creature in the world like a piece of timber. Mihawk came looking for him after that. The rematch happened on a small island nobody could find on a map. No witnesses, just 2 swordsmen and a promise that had been waiting 15 years to be kept. When it ended, Mihawk was lying on his back smiling, and Zoro was standing over him, with Wado Ichimonji at his throat. The strongest swordsman in the world was no longer Hawkeye. It was Roronoa Zoro. Luffy became Pirate King a few months later, but the man standing behind him with 4 swords at his side was the one the world had learned to fear first.